here with Leif Cocks from the Orangutan Project. Well, not just the Orangutan Project. The Orangutan Project has expanded into the International Elephant Project, as well as an International Tiger Project. And as part of our Change Makers interviews, I would just like to find out a little bit more about the Orangutan Project and discuss what are the needs out there, how can we help and support the orangutans out there, and also what are the challenges that Leif and the team are facing out there in the forest. Specifically, I think you've got the forest project that you're running as well. So I think well, that's a huge mouthful. I'm sort of introducing you quite informally. But if you could maybe just in your own words, just tell me, what are the biggest needs that you guys are having at the moment? What are your projects that you are focusing on for 2024? And how can people support you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So with any process, there's always a rate determining step. As we've learned in chemistry, in chemical reaction, there's a rate determining step. For us, it's money. We have in our group, we have the skills and the context to achieve our vision. But it's money that's holding us back. So that's the current situation we're in. To put that into our vision of what we're trying to achieve is, it's just no use saving bits of rainforest. You have to save entire functioning ecosystems of the right type, shape, and size. The reason being is the rainforest creates its own humidity and rainfall.
Yeah.
And so if you just save bits of rainforest, those rainforest systems will eventually collapse. Shape is important because there's huge edge effect, and up to a kilometer, on the edge of the rainforest, you can have up to 80% of the biodiversity missing from the edge effects of surrounding that forest. So having long, skinny forests or corridors doesn't hold a lot of biodiversity. And even from climate change, we know biodiverse forests hold more carbon than forests which are devoid of biodiversity. The third aspect, is type. All the nutrients flow downhill, and all the elephants, tigers, and orangutans and indigenous communities need the lowland riverine forest to survive. But governments tend to create national parks in the hills because it's for water catchment, and there's no pressure from palm oil and other industries to convert it because it's too steep for the agricultural practices. So unless we we can save all the highland primary forest, but we still won't have viable ecosystems that will survive into the future. And so we have this unique opportunity in the next decade to save functioning, viable ecosystems. After that, yes, certainly we have rainforest for a while, but those ecosystems will eventually collapse and the biodiversity will be gone. And saving the rainforest is the most cost-effective thing we could do to mitigate climate change. Now, linking into our core values of wanting to help indigenous communities, elephants, tigers, and orangutans, you need sufficient numbers of those species for the species to survive. So if you only save a few hundred of a particular species, they'll eventually inbreed into extinction. And so just saving orangutans or elephants as individuals without saving viable populations will mean eventually those species disappear. And it's also the same thing with indigenous communities, which we're helping through our Forest for People initiatives. But they also play another key role in the rainforest in Indonesia. Has never been empty. It's been, especially the lowland riverine forest, which we need to save as a priority, has always been occupied by indigenous communities. But their land has been taken away because they have no power. And so the land has been taken away by big multinationals. So our goal is to educate and make wealthy, not just in subsistence, but make them affluent in the ecosystems we're doing. Education and money translates to power. And that is then our succession plan of ensuring that these ecosystems will be maintained both environmentally, but also importantly economically. Yeah, and so they become safe and resilient against outside pressures. So it gives you, I guess, a big view about what we're trying to achieve in, at the moment, 8 ecosystems, the right type, shape, and size of the rainforest. But in the meantime, when we've got critically endangered species, such as elephants, tigers, and orangutans, every individual is valuable for the sake of the individual themselves as self-aware beings that share our planet. But they're also highly important as a genetic resource to keep their critically endangered species alive.
Oh, wow. I'm so glad you started with the biodiversity, but then also included the people, because I mean, I love this quote, and I'm not sure from where, somebody who mentioned that conservation is a people problem, not a wildlife or ecosystem problem. Ultimately, it's the hearts and minds we've got to change, and hearts and minds we've got to work with in the specific communities and support them. And I think that's your People and Forests program, trying to keep the biodiversity intact, working with the local communities. But I mean, I guess also working with those businesses and corporations, changing hearts and minds of providing direction on why it is so important to keep these ecosystems intact. We have a very similar issue, I mean, in Africa as well. You know, for example, grassland ecosystems, you know, it's not a forest. Forests are beautiful, and global initiatives are targeting forests. But, you know, people, our human eye, we see a grassland and immediately you start thinking, oh, development, you know, that is perfect for development. It's low-lying areas. We can build suburbs there, or we can build farm. You know, firstly, I mean, first place you will want to farm is your grassland, you know, because there's not a lot of rocks. It's not in the hills. You mentioned the hills before. So, you know, all of these ecosystems have their little spot in conserving biodiversity. And I think, like you say, you know, just to have these national parks allocated and only focusing on the specific areas that are conserved, and in the IUCN and the UN type of whether their target of 30%. I mean, there's a lot more areas that we need to target, you know, to try and conserve. Like, otherwise, we're going to end up with all these skinny, too small national parks where the animal habitat is squeezed. Yeah,
exactly. And from a global perspective, not only we have to deal with the carbon issue from fossil fuels, the methane issues from the dairy and meat industries, but we have to rewild about 25% of the planet to achieve our objectives. And, you know, highlighting what you said before, it's never wildlife versus people or the environment versus economy. These are false paradigms. It's about creating a better world for everybody. And the wonderful thing is, if you do good for everybody, you have achievable, lasting outcomes. And so love has no boundaries. So if you're in a win-lose situation, you may have a temporary gain, but you won't have a lasting gain. And so I call it the intelligent expression of love. And love is not specific to an individual, community, nation, or species. It's universal. And we're all interconnected. I mean, for example, the meat industry, you know, yes, that's, you know, causing more climate change than all the transport systems in the world combined. So it's obviously, from a climate change perspective, an important industry to phase out. And then we can talk about the cruelty to animals in that industry, as well as the cruelty to wild animals being poached and killed and their forests being destroyed. But there's also linked to health. We know eating meat is now, the World Health Organization listed a carcinogen at the same level as smoking. So it's hurting people through their dietary requirements. And also, destroying the rainforest is increasing temperatures and causing droughts, floods, and ruining the lives of the people, and ruining the future economic capacity of the country Indonesia by losing the rainforest, which is supporting the long-term economic viability of the whole country. So all these things are just a quick couple examples of how all things are linked. And unless we consider all living beings in intelligent expression of love, we will fail to achieve our outcomes.
Yeah. I think with that love example, I think what we dealt with a couple of years ago, just before COVID, I think it was this massive divide with people, where it was the people who were for the meat and against the meat, and for development and against development. And I think the important thing is from my perspective, is to try and take the politics out of conservation, to look at how we can. I don't see people as stopping eating meat tomorrow. I don't think it is something we have to deal with. Myself and my everyday diet, I've obviously doing what I'm doing. I've reduced my meat intake now to 1 meal a week, and it was actually less at a point. I think I was eating 2 meals a month. I've actually increased it to 1 meal a week because I was finding some health issues with not getting enough protein with the way I was eating, even though I'm drinking my smoothies and various things. But be that as it may, I'm doing my little bit to contribute, and I guess you've got the person sitting in his lounge who does his recycling, and he does a little bit of that, and the next guy who's got his electric vehicle, and he drives that. I think the important thing is, how do we create a structural change that doesn't change with the vote? For example, I'm sitting currently in New Zealand, where a new party has just taken over because of reasons, the community and all the people. It's quite a talk about point. The previous party was quite green, but I think they were voted out pretty much not specifically about green issues, but because of other issues. But now, with them being voted out, the green discussion, or the green, has now been put on the back burner, and we're looking now for the next 4 years or 8 years or whatever. You're looking at growth and development, and so I think it's, how do we unbundle those issues? How do we unbundle development from green, for example?
There's two issues you raised, which and so the first one is about people running electric bikes and going vegan, that sort of stuff, and I do all that, don't get me wrong, right? But from a conservation point of view, total waste of time. And we've sold this idea that our individual actions can make meaningful change in the world. Never has happened in the past, and it won't happen in the future. In fact, the carbon footprint, as we all understand, is invented by British Petroleum, one of the 100 companies that contributed to the vast majority of climate change, and has basically tried to stop any changes to protect the planet, to conserve their industry. So why did they create the carbon footprint? Because they wanted to do two things. They wanted to say, you're the problem, not them, and to go off and do your little greeny thing, right? And don't collectivize and make any meaningful change. So humans can only work and achieve things by collectivizing together in organizations, NGOs, and movements. So let's not worry about our individual actions. Let's worry about how well we collectivize to make that meaningful change. And because we've been sold this pup to disempower us to make the meaningful changes to make a better world. Now, the other aspect to it is we're talking about business and growth. Now, business and making money, that's all fine. But what business actually call externalities in their ledgers. Externalities are things that they know have an effect, but it doesn't cost them anything. Like you can pollute it and destroy a river, right, and kill the fisheries and or whatnot. Or the palm oil plantation can cause floods and droughts, and and take the resources away from local communities. They don't pay for that. The poor and the powerless. So what they do is they pass the true cost of production onto the powerless. And with climate change, the powerless is also the future generations who can't vote. So it's not about so industries who cannot be profitable without passing the true cost of production onto others should not be allowed to exist. Because it's not capitalism, it's not market driven, it's not progress, it's exploitation. Yep. However, there's many fantastic, people doing innovation and development, which are not exploitative, not passing the true cost of production on the others. So what we don't want to destroy growth and progress, and development. We want it to not to be exploitative, and which leads on to the second point I want to make is I don't really often people often talk about we have to keep growing and and etc. and the population is growing. Well, the population isn't going to keep growing. The population of the humans are collapsing, and the biggest thing most countries have to deal with is the population collapse which is coming. And how do we deal with the aging population, less workforce, and not, and economy is not based on continuous growth of the human population. That's the reality. So, we have to base an economy no longer on this perpetual growth, because that train has already left the station. We know the human population is going to peak soon at 9 billion and start collapsing, because we're simply not replacing ourselves. So basing your economic model on an old paradigm which we know is going to collapse is circumvent to madness, and therefore, as I says, it's never the environment versus the economy. These things are hand in hand. But what we want to do is stop the misinformation and stop the people who want to exploit others in the future for short-term profit, but allow those innovative and visionaries who make money, doing good things. We want them to grow and prosper.
I love where this conversation is going, because these type of things are so close to my heart. It's I think Africa, where my original home is and where I probably will return to soon, I think there's still some growth coming, and the economies there are pushing hard to be excluded out of some of the global agreements, and to give them some leeway to still grow, etc. But I mean, on the ground level, when you speak to the general public, people, friends around the barbecue, they are still incentivized as salespeople to get growth. If you don't get 20% growth this year, you're not getting your bonus. If you don't achieve this type of growth, there's no bonus, etc. So that mindset of growth is still there. But I really liked what you said about that collectivizing the blame, or putting the blame on the person. I have this very specific example that although the people sometimes think I must be crazy when I give this example, when I'm saying free-range chicken is part of the problem, or free-range eggs is part of the problem. It's not part of the solution. Free-range is an industry problem that's been pushed down onto the individual. The chickens should have livable conditions that are humane for them to live in. We still work in South Africa on A4, but some chickens are still in A4 size cages where they live to lay their eggs. That should be illegal. That should not be pushed down onto the consumer to say to buy free-range eggs. In a country, for example, like South Africa, where there's high poverty, the person is going to go to the shelf, he's going to pick the cheapest eggs. And free range has always been around about, I think it's between 10 and 20% of the market. It's never grown. The idea is it's supposed to grow. It's, by pushing it down on the individual, you actually take the companies off the hook.
No, you hit the nail on the head. You can't expect companies to, let's say if I'm a company and I'm paying my workers well, and not passing true cost of production of pallets, cleaning up and having a clean industry, I cannot compete. If other industries that can underpay their workers, exploit people, and pass on the true cost of production of others, they're going to outcompete me in a marketplace. And so it's always going to be a race to the bottom. So you can't expect companies as by themselves, without government regulation, to make the necessary changes. But if we make the regulations so companies can't be exploitive, have to look after the workers, look after their customers, etc., then it's an even playing field. And then the good companies who have innovation and the best products will prosper. And so you're dead right. It shouldn't be put down to the individual or even the companies, because there's some companies who are deliberately lobbying governments to reduce regulation. And what they do know is they will not be competitive in an even playing field. And so that's why they do that. But they shouldn't be allowed to influence politics. Let's have good regulation to even a playing field, and people have, for industries to not pass the true cost of production to others, and then we'll see the good industries prosper and get the reward they deserve. Not these dinosaurs who only business model that works is by exploiting others.
Yeah. Being on that topic, then, coming back to your forest initiatives and your orangutan initiatives, can you maybe just give us an idea of what is the state of palm oil effect on the forests at the moment? Has all the initiatives globally that's been done to remove palm oil from certain products, to ask consumers to buy less palm oil products? To give you an idea, I actually worked for a company which had palm oil actually in the name, but of the company. So it used to be, and there's still people who are saying it has less environmental footprint than other types of oils. But what do you see in the palm oil industry and the effects on the forests where you're operating at the moment?
Yeah, no, it's a great segue from what we previously were discussing. The first thing is there is no sustainable palm oil. Palm oil is a monoculture, and like all monocultures, it destroys the environment for which it's grown. So all the palm oil plantations will collapse in 50, 60 years' time, leaving a desert wasteland in their wake. So the idea of sustainable palm oil or palm oil have no effect is just rubbish. That just science just doesn't. That's not how science and nature works. But ironically, the second aspect is linking to our previous conversation. To have an anti-palm oil campaign or go sustainable palm oil, whatever that means, is a waste of time and affects no meaningful change. Won't save one tree, one orangutan. It's a misdirection, because it's not really addressing the true driver of deforestation. The deforestation occurs actually very much linked to the election cycle. So if you want to be elected, you need a lot of money to get elected, to get your message out there. And the people who give you the money, they need the payoff once you get in power. And what do you have? Well, you have you have leases to rainforest land that you can give away in compensation for you getting elected. And so they will destroy the rainforest just for the value of the trees alone, because the trees are worth millions in the average concession. So you can stop palm oil tomorrow. They're still going to take the trees for the value of the trees. They're still going to use trees to pay off, political capital. Now, but then they're obviously often good businessmen, and they'll plant whatever short-term crop will give maximum profit. And that's often palm oil, but can be pulp paper, it can be rubber, it can be sugar palm. And so if you, for example, manage to stop all palm oil expansion tomorrow, you're not going to save one tree, because they'll still knock the forest down for the value of the trees, and they'll plant pulp paper, they'll plant rubber plantations instead, and still make a fantastic profit. And so, so indiscriminate charity causes more problems in the world than it solves. So we not only have to have the love and compassion to make a better world for living beings, but we have to intelligently apply that love. I call it the two wings of the bird. One wing is love and compassion. The other wing is knowledge and intelligence. And if one of those wings are broken, the bird flaps around in circles and never gets off the ground. And the anti-palm oil movement, or the sustainable palm oil movement, the perfect example where good people are, in a sense, effectively moving people in a direction that has no meaningful change. Now, don't get me wrong, just like the electric bike, which I've got in my garage and my solar panels I've got on my roof, I'm not against going palm oil free as an individual, as an individual choice, because more than likely that palm will replace rainforests that contain orangutans, tigers, and elephants, and indigenous communities. But to feel that, that we can be misled into campaigns and initiatives that's going to achieve the meaningful change, I think is a misdirection.
Yeah, I recently had a look at the global map with the palm oil expansion, and what sort of getting an idea what is happening with palm oil globally. And it seems like I think there's a lot of focus targeted in the East on non-palm oil and to put pressure. It seems like in Africa there seems to be some development starting now, and it's exactly what you're saying. If you're going to be able to plant it in another area where people aren't looking, you as a farmer now in a tropical area in Africa, I can do some palm oil here. They're not looking for palm oil in our country, so we can still do it. I spoke to another an ecotourism provider in Africa in the tropics, and she was saying that they're chopping down the forest to plant eucalyptus trees.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not something that you hear about, and that's not published in the press, that we must stop using eucalyptus. But this is something, this is the major pressure they have there. And I mean, they're chopping down the forest in Argentina for cattle, for rearing cattle. So like you say, it's the economic model and the political model
exactly
underlying this whole system.
Yes, exactly. It's I always say, for every complex problem in the world, there's a simple solution which is absolutely wrong. And so people want simple solutions because that's how the human mind likes to work, And so the idea of, they're the rainforest and replaced by palm oil or eucalyptus, so I'll start a palm oil campaign, and somehow that will affect government regulation, corruption, and exploitative business models is naive. And unfortunately, as I would say, we live in the most important decade in human history. This one will determine not that we're going to leave a better planet for future generations, but leave a recoverable one. And we don't have time to be misdirected, into virtue signaling, as individuals, or we need to actually apply our love and compassion in an intelligent way, because we don't have time to muck around in this decade.
Yeah. So maybe just some last words, and yeah, I've got a little in the back here. I've got a little African elephant. This is a little from the Addo Elephant Park. This little guy is playing in the mud. They're learning how to splash himself with mud in the gravel road. You know, what if there's a couple of parting thoughts on the orangutans and the elephants and the tigers? What is your requests and suggestions for 2024?
Well, my request is to for us to expand our love and compassion to living beings outside of humanity. I mean, I know we're having a hard time expanding our compassion for other humans in different races and cultures and countries. So it is a big ask. But we're all in this, you know, spaceship Earth together. Unless we take our compassion and love for other living beings, especially the self-aware persons such as orangutans and elephants. They're self-aware and suffer emotionally just as we do. And not only for our sake, but for their sake, we need to expand our love and compassion. But again, this is not a win-lose situation. What we find as human beings and as self-aware persons, when we becoming loving, compassionate, and selfless, and work to a higher ideal beyond our own selfish needs, we actually become healthy and happy and more prosperous. So by joining a movement such as the Orangutan Project and our other projects to make meaningful change in the world, or any other great cause, you know, as long as they're intelligently applying that love and compassion in a way that affects meaningful change, means not only you are able to collectivize to make that meaningful change, but we find that actually the people themselves, our donors and sponsors, actually get enriched as individuals. And because ultimately it's selfishness and our lack of connection and recognizing our shared sense of our shared beingness with all life on planet, which makes us unhappy. And so it's always a win-win situation. So I hope that probably completes a circle of connectiveness to include our supporters and donors on this journey.
Oh, thank you very much. And I must say, I really feel that this inclusive idea, you know, of this collectiveness, working with the communities, working with the people, and not bringing this eco guilt, or I think there's a specific term for it. You know, I think that's partly driving the opposition to environmental initiatives. You know, instead of coming out with, we all love beautiful environment, we want to look after other creatures, we're not born to hate, but we create this opposition.
We create the opposition because we love criticizing others because it makes us feel more important and better than others. But if
we include everybody, you know, you include the farmers, include the communities. Those farmers are also not born to destroy the forests, but they have families to feed. The economy is also pressurizing them. A lot of them are starving in many such circumstances, in many cases, you know.
Exactly, you know. And what we have to do is you know, with compassion and love, include all, even those the ones we're fighting against, and those, you know, because if as we see with politics, the more you criticize others, more people harden into their preconceived positions, and they're not open to change. And if you really genuinely want to change the world, you have open listening, love, compassion, and an open door policy, and never criticize anybody for their past actions. You know, so they have to defend them and solidify, provide the opportunity that we all, you know, can move to a future, you know, and be accepted without criticism. And that's one of the important effects of change. And again, it's the intelligent expression of love, because often people without reforming themselves, try to reform the world. And all they do is alienate people and, against the movement, rather than engaging them in and bringing them on board to what we're trying to achieve.
The Buddhists have this amazing thing called Tonglen, is that it's actually taking other people's hurt and internalizing it and actually breathing out peace and love to even people that you struggle to get along with, and to people, to your opposition or your enemy, or whoever you want to call that person, and give that love back, give that love and peace back.
Exactly. Martin Luther King said, hate can't destroy hate, only love can do that.
I love it, and I think I want to close on that note. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian.